Excuse me, could I just go downstairs for a moment? I'll be right back. You don't need me for a few minutes.
Today is March 5th, 1997. This is an interview with Joseph Riesenbach, and the interviewer is Lenore Bienenfeld-Weinstein. The interview takes place in Hallandale, Florida, in the United States, and the language is English. This is the first tape. My name is Lenore Bienenfeld-Weinstein. Today's date is March 5th, 1997. I am conducting an interview with Joseph Riesenbach, and the interview takes place in Hallandale, Florida, in the United States, and the language is English. Can you please tell me your name?
My name is Joseph Riesenbach.
Can you spell your name for me?
R-I-E-S-E-N-B-A-C-H.
What was your given name at birth?
Joseph.
Do you go by any nicknames?
No.
What is your date of birth?
May the 8th, 1929.
And how old does that make you today?
67. 68, sorry.
What city were you born in?
Markowa, Poland.
And is that near any larger city?
Rzeszów.
What were your parents' names?
My father was Yakov, and they called him Jake, and my mother's name was Itala.
What was her maiden name?
Rubenfeld.
Tell me a little bit about your father.
My father was born not far from Markowa, and Markowa, the village itself, was a very heavy populated village. I believe I found out just a while ago the population is about 3,000, and it's about 25 Jewish families, 150 people. And my father was involved in several businesses. In the winter, he was a cattle buyer, trading, selling, and taking them to the market and so on. In spring and summer, he purchased orchards in bloom. And when the crop was ready to be picked, he had a fairly large crew, and he picked the crop off, and then we warehoused it in our premises, which we had a very large warehouse and packaged, and we were exporting it, not too sure where, but it was outside the country, I believe Germany, Czechoslovakia, and so on. This was my father's main occupation.
Tell me a little bit about your mother.
Mother was also involved. We had a store, sort of like a food store here, different varieties of products, and also she had materials. And most of the time she was out of the home, going from home to home, seeing certain ladies which she was selling these materials, and a lot of time was trading in food products, like different things that we needed for our home, for our basic foods. And this was her profession, sort of. And of course, looking after the children.
Were there other children in your family?
2 sisters.
Their names?
Jenny and Marion. Manya. Yeah.
Did you know your grandparents?
My grandfather, vaguely, and my grandmother, yes, she stayed to the end, well, just before we left home. Yes. I knew my grandmother better than my grandfather.
What was the religious community like? You had said the numbers, but do you remember what the community did?
Well, the Jewish families, which I knew, mostly were very poor. There was some well-to-do, and they were religious in a way. They kept up the holidays. They weren't, very, very religious, but the traditional things they kept. And I remember our home very well because all the holidays, Shabbat and other holidays, high holidays, so and we had provided a room in our home for a synagogue, and they were coming in and praying, and so I've met most of the community through our home. I remember one particular occasion is Passover, before Passover, you know, all the commotion, cleaning the dishes and making kosher, and when we baked matzahs, that was our place for that. And same thing every Friday. They used to bring the families to the shul, you know, for the cooking for Friday, and after the shul next day, Saturday, they were taking it out. I remember that situation very well. And our home was religious, kept, you know, I remember it very well. My father kept up. My grandfather was more religious. And that's about all at the moment.
What kind of schooling did you have?
Very little, up to grade 4 until the war broke out and the Germans came in, and that was the end of that. I wasn't allowed to go to school.
Before the war broke out, did you have any knowledge of what was going on in Germany?
Very little, if any. Whether my parents didn't want to say, I just heard here and there, you know. We had no communication, there was no newspaper, there was no radio. And I didn't hear really anyone saying too much. I knew very little of anything, yes.
Do you remember as a child any incidents of anti-Semitism that happened to you?
Yes. Lots.
Can you describe some?
Well, being harassed, called, you know, names. And, you know, the Polish type of names they were using for the Jewish, you know, Żyd and different other words I don't want to say, you know, really. And I haven't been abused or beaten or anything, but I heard it quite a lot. And the same thing in school. I was harassed and by the students and some teachers, and our home was threatened by drunks at night. It wasn't broken in, but doing damage to windows, throwing stones, and at night, you know, you can hear screaming, you know, calling our names out, you know, stuff like that I recall, yes.
Do you remember when war broke out?
Very well, yes.
Can you describe what happened?
Well, all of a sudden, we just heard planes flying very low, and I saw the Polish army sort of retreating on foot mainly, and with rifles in their hands and aiming at the planes, you know, trying to shoot. Or I remember a neighbor said, please don't shoot, you know, what kind of damage can you do with a rifle, and so on. And they did throw a couple bombs, and one landed on across our home, which we had a piece of land, and we all ran into that piece of land in the field because there was high corn crop, you know. We were hiding, and a couple shrapnels hit my hands, and that's what I remember when the war broke out.
How old were you at this time?
I believe that time 10 years old, yes.
Then what happened?
Well, all I remember after a day or two, I see the Germans were coming through the highway, which we lived. Our home was near a main road, and on foot with horses and wagons, you know, all kind of artillery, just constantly going through. And as a child, we were just watching, you know. To us was, you know, I didn't understand really too much. I thought it was lots of fun, you know, because lots of action, commotion, so on.
Do you remember any changes coming into your village after the Germans came in?
After a while, yes, the first set of officers, they walked into our home and they said they're going to occupy some of our rooms without any warning or anything, to clear whatever they wanted, to see the space and to clear away, and then they're going to stay. They didn't tell us how long and so on. They were just ordinary officers. There was no harm, nothing I could feel threatened. As a matter of fact, they were very nice. And they were Germans, of course. And they just stayed there for a period of resting and going. All I could hear, they were talking about they're going to the Russian front. And the length of time they stayed, I would think of 4 to 6 weeks. And mainly they were just resting, cooking. They were cooking their own food, and they didn't demand any services. And we didn't do nothing. And after a while, when the time came, they said they're leaving, and saying our goodbyes to us, we were quite surprised, in tears. And they said to my father, "Where we going is not so good." I remember those words, you see, in Germany. I understood a little bit, you see. And they left.
And then what happened?
Then after a while, again, a second group of officers came in, and they were the Gestapo type. They were, I believe, in the blue uniforms. And they came in, a little more different attitude, demanding, and not talking too much. And we had to serve them, cleaning up after them, the dishes, the equipment, shined and polished, the belts, the boots. I'm not sure I think maybe some rifles too, what they had. And we had to be careful, because we were threatened and we were afraid. And they also stayed for 2-3 weeks.
Do you remember your feelings as a child, what it was like?
Not too much. There again, I didn't understand perhaps at that time what it's all about, you see. But I could see on my parents, faces, they were worried, you see. And they left. They didn't threaten us with abuse or anything. They were just very, very rough in the language they were using and everything else. And then they left, and that was it. That was the second group. And then there's a third group came in, which was the SS. Now those we were really threatened with our lives. And we did whatever we've done, they weren't satisfied. This was no good. If we put the boots a certain way, it wasn't straight enough, a certain way facing. It's kind of nonsense. And I saw they were hitting my father, kicking him. And I don't think they hurt me or my sisters, but you couldn't enter a certain area, of their rooms and so on. And when they brought out the equipment to clean, to polish, this has to be done at a certain time. And then in the winter time, when it came the heavy snowfalls, and we had to go and clean the highways because they were all blocked. They couldn't go through the highways. I remember that. And I had to go with my father and many, many others from the village. There was hundreds and hundreds on foot walking towards the highway, and there were banks, 5-6 foot, snow banks, and we had to clean this by shovel. All day, they didn't provide any food, no transportation. Then we had to walk, I would say, 5-6 miles back and forth every day till the highway was cleared. And this was going on, I think, about 4 or 5 weeks, and they left. I couldn't tell you the exact dates or times. This was going on since 1939 till 1943, and in 1943, there again, we did not know what was going on at the outside the village, and I'm not sure if my father knew. Maybe he did know, he didn't tell us. And one particular morning, 2 Polish police officers walked into our home, and I happened to be in that particular, we have like a Florida room here. We had such a nice room as well, big windows, and you could see them coming in a hurry. And they said to my father, Jake, he says, we just got word they're going to round up the whole village, the Jewish people. And it doesn't sound too good. He says, as a friend, leave immediately. And when I say immediately, now. We sort of stood and looked at each other, and they left right away, and we left. We didn't take anything with us. The only thing we took with us, it was the Sefer Torah. And everything was left behind, and we just took off to the fields. It was, you know, our home was a little uphill, and then a little ravine and fields, and just, so we walked about 2-3 miles, and we just sat there in the field, hidden between high vegetable plants, which is corn, potatoes, you know, it was just that high, about 2 feet high. And during the day, we had to lie down. And at night, we just stood up and, you know, when there's nobody in the fields, just to stretch ourselves out.
What season was this?
I would think this would be in May or June, somewhere late in spring, because I remember the vegetables were already a certain height, you see, the height.
Was there anybody with you besides your immediate family?
No. And my grandmother didn't want to come with us. She went a different way. I don't know why and so on. That was the end of her. We never seen or heard anything.
And how long did you stay out in the fields?
We sat there in the fields. It was quite at length because during the night, well, we couldn't stay there forever because if the crops are ready to be picked, actually the farmers are going to come out. And it was dangerous, so during the night, my mother was left to fields, and she went to knocking at the door to certain homes to find a space, a home where to stay, you know, somebody should take us in, and also bring some food. And my mother was very liked in the village because, you know, she had a lot of women there which were doing business with, and she was the likable, you know, person, and so she wasn't in danger, and she wasn't, you know. Just sort of looked away. Anyway, she was knocking at doors every night, refusals. Some of them just shut. As soon as they saw her face, they just shut the door. And this was going on for weeks and weeks, till finally she found a place to, wouldn't take the whole family, which was 5 of us, but they'll take the 2 sisters, the 2 younger sisters, they'll take it. So she came back at night, you know, it was, I don't know what time it was very late, took the 2 sisters, took them into this home and left them there. And then again, she kept going every night to find space for us. And she did find a place, which is the people named Julia and Joseph Bar. And she pleaded with him, please take us in. He says, hopefully the war is not going to be long, and save us. And you know, we have a few pieces of land and a home, and after the war is finished, it can be all yours. But we were fortunate she found this family, because this little lady, Julia Bar, was very Christian, very religious and Christian, a true Christian. And she said, okay, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and it's worthwhile saving you. And the husband, he was just the opposite. He was a real tall, I would say about 6, 7, 8 foot, loud, and somehow he respected her. He wasn't that religious, but he went along with it. He respected her. And he took us in, and right away, you know, it's a small little house. I believe there was only 2 bedrooms, and one was for the daughter and one for themselves. And so he took us on the attic, which was 2 sides, when the staircase goes up, and it was stored with hay for the animal, for the cattle, and that's where we were sleeping and sitting and eating, you know, spent our time. But my mother was very uncomfortable with her two daughters, with my two sisters. Something was eating her inside that they're not going to be safe. And sure enough, one evening she asked permission. Oh yes, then she had to retract a little bit. And as she was uncomfortable, you know, and she felt something is going to happen to them, so she had to approach them again. Please, we have my two daughters, they're small, they're somewhere there. It's not proper, you know, not to be with us, and they maybe not be safe. This is whatever's going to happen, please help me. Allow me to bring this. You don't have to give us any extra food. We'll share our food with them. And she agreed, and she says, okay, bring him in.
How old were your sisters at this time?
Well, let's see, 1943, so I would have been 13, well, probably 12, and 10, the younger one. And she left at night and came to this home, and this woman right over said, oh, am I glad you're here. Says, what's the matter? He says, well, she didn't want to say much. And she took my two sisters away. And my younger sister said to my mother that night, when my mother arrived, that she told them that somebody's going to come in next day and take him to some kind of a school place. Something, you know, a schooling or whatever it is. Whether this was true, I doubt it, because there was no such thing, you know. Probably she would have sent him somewhere, or maybe left him in the field in the open, and that it. And this is what my younger sister told my mother that night. So that shows you she felt it as a mother, you know, that something is going to be wrong. So she brought him back, and we stayed together there for 2 years and 5 days.
Can you describe in detail what that area was like?
During that 5-year period, sometimes I wonder when I think about it, how we did it. Surviving the heat in the summer and the cold in the winter. It was on an attic, on hay, all that, you know, sitting there. We were not allowed to go outside, of course, to be seen by neighbors or, you know, people passing by. We were not allowed to go downstairs to the open unless he permitted us in a certain time. We had to make arrangements to be safe. And as the time was going on, the war was going on, and the Germans were going in deeper and deeper. Obviously, the war wasn't going to end as soon as we expected. And he was quite concerned. He was talking to us. He says, it doesn't look too good. What are we going to do here? And of course, he knew that his life was in danger just as much as ours. And then we found out that he belonged to the Henderson Army, underground army, Polish army, which they were working in the army. We found that out. So we felt a little bit better because he was politically involved. So I figured it's good. It's a good thing. And so he gave us information. I guess he was going to meetings, whether he was going once a week, I don't know. And he was getting information, you know, more, you know, than others. And he said, it doesn't look too good. The war is going to be, we don't know when it's going to be over. And I guess he heard from neighbors, and they were going to church. He was very religious. Every Sunday it was church time, and people talking. And I guess maybe he heard something, you know, that Jews were found there and the families were shot, which we were aware of it. A family of 9 Gentiles, 9 children, and 2 parents were shot with the found, I don't know how many Jewish family. And he was very worried and concerned. So he said, this sitting upstairs is not very safe. You know, when he heard that, he says, God, what is he going to do here? And he came up with an idea. He's going to make a bunker in the basement. It was like, they call it a cellar, for an emergency, in case he hears something or something like that, you know, we're going to run down quickly and hide in there. And what is a bunker? It was a plain, ordinary dugout basement, which you call a cellar, with a narrow staircase going down and a shelf facing, the staircase for storage he kept there. To the right he had potatoes, for his winter food, and to the left there were beets for the animals, and that was the whole cellar. So the idea was he's going to dig out, remove half of the potatoes out to the other side and shore around with boards, and just to make enough space, I would say, less than half of that floor in a room, just enough to get in and be crouched like this in a false ceiling, filled up the potatoes back, and he left a little corner empty, just enough to get in and then fill the potatoes of an emergency. That was the emergency. Escape. And said, good thing he had that. Fine. Never thought of anything else. Was sitting upstairs, and then when they went to the field, so he says, okay, I'm going to draw whatever curtains they had, which they weren't very dark, they would see through a type of thing. And you can go downstairs and just quiet and just sort of stretch out and sit. At least you see daylight. And we did that occasionally, not too often, And then an hour or two, I went back up and sit, sleep and talk. What else could we do? And during this day, the first emergency arose. They went on a Sunday to church, and somebody came up to the pulpit, whether it was the priest, I wasn't quite sure, whoever, must have some authority, and announced that today, as soon as you've come home, have your dinner, and there's going to be a search, the whole village. There is a family of missing. I don't think they said the name, but there's one family missing, 5 people.
We're coming to the end of the first tape now.